minimize this stuff, just get it out of the way. Go to the perspective view. So there's the camera. So I've kind of moved it off into outer space there. So we're going to point it back up to where we need to be. Let's go and look through the camera mode again, and we'll angle it up. And when we set this to 180, 0. Right. So we'll find our Vipers in here somewhere again. There we go. All right. Okay, that's kind of cool. All right, scrub through it a little bit more. Go and find another Viper to focus on. I'll put these guys down here. Yeah, they're cool. All right. And somewhere in here, I think what we got to do, probably around here. So go back into the graph editor, and we'll create a keyframe. This will be where we snap out. We're going to set a keyframe to start the snap, and we'll go in probably, we'll use frame 40, and we'll go and create another keyframe, and we'll pull that value back to, say, 5. It was really, really low. You'll see right away here that the zoom has done something bizarre to my graph, so we're going to just hit auto fit. What it's done is basically there's a function here in the TCP spline, and I need to smooth that out or just lock it, and we'll just call it linear. All right. Boom. And afterwards, we'll leave it like that. You can even out a little bit, or I can increase the tension, so it's a very, very, very quick snap. All right. And immediately when you're working with a real camera, after you do like a zoom in or zoom out, you kind of readjust the camera a little bit. So we're going to readjust the camera here a little bit. In this case, we're just going to move it just slightly, and we're going to go in a few more frames, and we're going to do a little bit more of a readjustment, and then we're going to watch this fleet of Vipers kind of fly by. All right, we'll angle up here. This keyframe might be a little bit close, so I'm just going to push it out a little bit further down the timeline. And this one. Okay, there we go. And so now we've got this animation. We started here looking at Vipers, and then we snap back and we see the full meal deal. Now what would be really cool with this shot, and we'll do that in the next video, is that we'll get the Galactica in here, and then we'll really hammer this machine. For now though, I'm going to leave it here. We've got basically what I need. I'm going to do myself a favor again. I'm going to save this work. I'm going to go save scene as Viper Armada. Okay, so we'll call this Viper Armada. 4 groups. Mixed MK2s and MK7s. So Mark 2s and Mark 7s. 6 each. Now this is kind of a goofy way to name a file, but it's really descriptive, and it gives me a really good idea of exactly what's in here. We're going to hit return. And just really quickly for the fun of it, we're going to set the anti-aliasing a little bit higher on this. We'll set it to 4. And instead of doing full-on motion blur, we're going to just really quickly simulate it with a tool here under Scene. Go to the Image Processing tab, or F8 for those of you with the shortcuts that are the same as mine. I'm using the mouse mostly for doing this stuff because everybody's shortcuts are slightly different. Tweak your setup to whatever you want. But for now, we'll go into the Add Image Processing filter, and there's a function in here called Vector Blur. Now this is what most other 3D package users have to rely on, but they do this in compositing. They actually export vector blur image information, and they rely on the compositing package to do that. You can do that directly in Lightwave one of 2 ways. You can work with the actual in-camera motion blur, which is incredibly awesome, It's one of the best in the business, if not the best in the business for motion blur. Or you can work with vector motion blur, which will apply the motion blur based off of vector information that's stored in the image, and then save the image out with that applied. So here we have vector blur. We've got it set to 100%. I'm just going to enable, sorry, not hidden render geometry, but we're going to enable high quality. Turn that off again. All right. And we're going to close this window down. That's pretty good. Actually, one last thing. We're going to add some stars in the background here. We're going to go to Star Pro. All right. And we're going to go and change these values. I like it at 1.5 for star brightness. We'll leave the rest of these numbers pretty much where they are. The star spot size, we're going to reduce that to 1.25. And we're going to say it's got 10 motion blur segments for the moment. That would match most of the time how many motion blur segments I add if I'm using the real motion blur function in Lightwave, which would be under this area here. Go photo realistic blur, and I would set 10. Because that's going to take a while to render, and normally I would throw this over the network to render these things, and I want to keep this demo relatively short, we're going to just leave it to off and we'll use the vector motion blur. Alright, so we're going to just scrub back a little bit here. Okay, so we've got some animation, we've got some blur and some stuff going on. I'm going to minimize that window. Alright, and this is going to be the fun part. And then now that I've done that, I'm going to once again save my scene. And we'll call this revision R1. And if I made another adjustment, it'd be R02, R03, R04, etc. And then that number changes to an FO1 when we actually finalize everything in the shot, and it's looking great. Okay, so now it's time to actually render this. Let's pick this particular frame here. I think this will be a little bit easier for the machine to handle just at the moment. And we're going to hit the render key and proceed. So you can see it building all of this up. Just going to switch over to the task manager, and you can see where things are at. So again, this portion of the rendering process is not multi-threaded. It's generating all those motion blur vectors and everything else that needs to be considered, the shadow maps. Most of the time that can be cached. Once this is done doing what's doing, it'll start the rendering process, and we'll actually get a frame of this probably within 30 to 45 seconds. With the anti-aliasing increase, though, it might be a little bit longer, maybe a minute. So it's going through and generating all those different shadow maps, and this is going to be the thing that takes a little bit of time. I'll be back in just a moment, and we'll take a look at the resulting image.